There are some issues. Of course, I go on and on about this, unfortunately, and I'm so sorry to do so. I hope it's not too tiring. But there are still issues about the Home Office and therefore about Suella Braverman. And one of the issues that I think isn't fully understood is if Suella Braverman has been passing emails to other people, it's not only whether those other people are entitled to see those emails, it's the fact that she's passing these emails on unsecured email devices in an unsecured way. When we know that Liz Truss has just had her phone hacked or had her phone hacked over the summer and before. We know that there are very efficient hackers out there. And Suella Braverman has ignored that fact. She must have had this information long ago. And yet she acted with a disregard for security. That makes her a serious security risk. And I'm not sure I like the idea of a Home Secretary who is herself a security risk to our nation. Now, the Home Office itself is bigger than Suella Braverman and it needs a serious overhaul. It has been brought into chaos by its previous incumbent, by Priti Patel. Utter chaos. Priti Patel's obsession with immigration, she blamed everything on immigration, has meant that the real problems, the struggles, the technological, the staffing struggles that the Home Office has clearly got were ignored, were covered by this absurd rhetoric that seems to find favour with a particular group of people. So let's look at this in detail. First of all, we've got the bomb attack yesterday, and we've also got the fallout from the visit of Miss Braverman to the same centre in Kent, where there is such overcrowding that it's resulted in disease, diphtheria, scabies, and claims of assault. Now, these people are there, detained by us, they're under our protection, they shouldn't be suffering medical problems and they shouldn't be suffering from assault. It's simply unacceptable. They also, I think, should be safe. So it's our responsibility to ensure that the perimeter is safe. It's our responsibility to ensure that they have proper medical treatment. Our responsibility to ensure that people are not abused. The Home Secretary should this morning be explaining herself in Parliament or should be doing the rounds of the TV studio. She's doing neither. She's hiding. Why? Because there are issues surrounding her own behaviour which are overwhelming her and which mean that she can't deal with the real issues which are about the office that she holds and the ministry that she represents. So she is, in other words, utterly redundant and useless and needs to be replaced as soon as possible. She has become a distraction. There are huge delays of 120 to 150,000 backlog of cases already in the system, to say nothing of the extra cases which are waiting to go into the system. And that backlog includes legal cases going back to 2007. The numerous applications which we are under an obligation to process. Now, of course, it helps. It helps if we have deals with other countries and we can get their staff into our country to help process these applications. So a great initiative by Edi Rama from Albania, which initiative I believe will be starting soon. But this This should eclipse all those stories about people being summarily deported. That should never happen. Instead, we should be using staff from the country to help process some of these applications, but it should be done with under our control. A report by a cross-party group of MPs has come out identifying internal failings rather than a rise in migration as the main problem in the Home Office. The rise in migration is the thing that is blamed, but it's rhetoric. There may have been a rise in people crossing the channel, but the issue really is the breakdown in the asylum system. And there's been a demonstrable breakdown, a collapse indeed. It's a squalid system. And I saw something similar about 20 years ago when I lived in Greece, where the system gave up. And it was kick-started again. It was kick-started back into action by a right-wing cabal. And that led directly to torture, rape, and abuse, and a complete failure to reform, even though there were instructions by the European Court of Human Rights. I was myself responsible for some of those instructions being delivered about 10 years later, and nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. This chaos continues to this day. And if there is chaos in the system, a rise in immigration, a rise in migration, simply compounds the problem, and everybody is miserable. We have to get the system right. If the system is not right, the system doesn't work. And we can play the blame game for a while. Priti Patel clearly was very good at that blame game, but then she had been accused of bullying. One might suggest the blame game is a raison d'etre for somebody accused of bullying. The report identifies two major issues. One, poor decision-making, and two, inattention. Both the result of Priti Patel's tenure. But I would suggest some of it goes back to Mrs. May. When we rely too much on shuffling pieces of paper, our attention is distracted. We need to be looking at the issues, not the size of our file. So Priti Patel blamed the sheer numbers, abuses, the sheer numbers. But, she was the one accused of abuse. She was the one accused of bullying. So maybe she was not in a position to command the support of the Home Office team that she had under her. Maybe that was where the rot really set in. And the report points to the glacial progress in asylum paperwork. 550 days. Can you realize 550 days to process a child? 449 days to process an adult. 3,000 unaccompanied children at the last count. 3,000. That's 3,000 times 550 days. And when this report was being drawn up, the numbers were 117,000 cases in progress. That's not the cases waiting to start. And at the same time, we have evidence of poor medical treatment, overcrowding, and that overcrowding specifically, and poor medical treatment, that overcrowding and poor medical treatment specifically ignored by the person who is now our current Home Secretary when she was last in office and when she last went to the centre in Kent. This is a national disgrace. It's and we are hiding behind rhetoric. There are solutions. As I say, there are proactive politicians around the world who are happy to help. But instead of enlisting their help, we have indulged in ranting. I'm really impressed by Eddie Rama's suggestion or recommendation, and in fact implementation, of sending security officers to the UK. It needs to be treated with care. It needs to be processed with care. But I think I think among other things it will help with communication to have people who speak the language there. If we have such an influx of Albanian migrants crossing the Channel, then it makes perfect sense to have Albanian officers at hand to help with the processing. But that processing is our responsibility, particularly if these people claim asylum.